Hello, my name's Martin Goebel, and today I'm going to talk to you about whether or not service management can actually be agile. So I work for Tata Consultancy Services, where I've been for the last 11 years. Prior to that, I was a service manager and process designer for a large investment bank, and prior to that, I was actually a research scientist. So I've had a long, varied and interesting career. And what I'm talking about today, service management in an agile environment or agile service management, is something that myself and my organization, Enterprise Agility is the practice I work for, have been thinking about this for a considerable length of time. However, I must stress that the views that I share with you today are my views and don't necessarily reflect those of Tata Consultancy Services. So I'm going to talk about Agile in its most basic form. So why Agile? Why do we care about Agile? Why do we need to consider it? And what difference does Agile make to service management? Does operating service management in an Agile environment have an impact on the way we work in service management? And can we take Agile practices and make service management itself an Agile activity? And the purpose of this presentation today is to get you to think a little bit about whether Agile service management is a reality and what benefits you will get from applying Agile ways of working to service management. So I have a very basic viewpoint on Agile. For me, it's two distinct things that come together to form a whole that is Agile. The first is the ways of working, and we often see this reflected in a product-based organization. So you have a collection of people aligned to a product, and they may be split into scrums or tribes, depending on the terminology and the actual framework that you are using. Frequently, there is a product owner, so somebody that is responsible for overseeing the development, maintenance, and operation of that product. Those products might be technical products or they might be business products. That's a whole different conversation. Within that product, you will have, as I said, individual scrums or squads, whatever, and they will be run by a scrum master. And depending on how you have developed and defined your operating model, you might have separate development teams, or you might have a full DevOps solution where the people that are involved in both the development and the operations of that product are arranged in scrums. So that's the way of working. That's what we're going to talk about. Perhaps the more, dare I say, interesting, to me at least, but the more crucial thing for an agile, true agile delivery is the mindset. It's enabling those teams that are within those products to make their own decisions, to empower them so that they can prioritize their work according to what they believe or understand is the current priority, so that they can manage their own workload. And to do this, obviously, there needs to be a great degree of transparency. There needs to be a very clear vision of both where the product needs to go and how far along that path we are. So for me, as I said, there's two clear things. There's that way of working, that operating model, that structure that helps us to deliver product in an agile way, and there's the mindset that enables those people within that structure to work effectively. What we need to understand is, can service management benefit from these things, and how can service management interact with this changing organization? Because obviously this is a challenge. This is very different to the type of organization that we're used to working in, where we have a number of development teams and we have a very clear delivery organization, and we know where service management fits as a horizontal within that delivery organization. So that is the purpose of my talk today and the talks that are going to follow me, where they discuss some of this in more detail. So first of all, can we make service management itself agile? Well, I would argue that quite a lot of what we do in service management is already agile. So this is a very poor and rather badly rendered slide, but I'm sure you would still recognize the work log screen from that ITSM tool that is sitting in front of us, which basically splits down the tasks that we as a team need to do into something not unlike a Kanban board. So where we have those things that we are waiting to do, those that we are doing that are work in progress, and those that are done or resolved, as we would be if we were looking at a set of incidents or a set of service requests, for example. So for me, the more standard processes, our standard ITIL service management processes, our basic delivery processes, those of you who go back to the good old days of ITIL v2, they are already working in a agile way in that you have a backlog and you look at that backlog, which is your set of tickets, your set of incidents, your set of requests, and you look at which is the highest priority, applying your intelligence, and you then act upon that. Obviously, there are some complexities and we can put things into pending and et cetera, but essentially we're managing a backlog and we're acting to deliver on that backlog. This could also be said to be true of change management, for example, where we have a large set of changes and we are prioritizing, scheduling, delivering those changes. Things become a little bit more interesting when you look at something like continuous service improvement, and that's a prime sort of candidate for developing a backlog and for using agile techniques to deliver those service improvements. So I wouldn't argue that you can't make continual service improvement more agile. Some of the other processes like service level management, well, that's a big challenge, isn't it? Because that really is where we need to be in a position, perhaps during the lifetime of a contract, to adapt and evolve those service levels. And can we do that in an effective way? Well, that's quite a challenge, and is not something I'm going to go into in any detail today because I don't have an answer yet. But we do need to think about how we can make things like service level management more agile. But I would argue that capacity management, well, it is what it is. And I don't feel that actually bringing any kind of agile techniques to capacity management is necessarily going to make it better. Happy to have that discussion, but that's my opinion. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to address the challenges that are presented by having service management in an agile environment. And we've thought about this quite hard over the last few months in my practice about how we can bring service management into an agile environment and make it effective. And we've come up with lots of different solutions, and this is just one of them. But this is not so much a solution as more a sort of straw man to take and present to people to get them to think about how they might possibly evolve their service management. And in this case, we've got a service management center, which is sitting in the center of our organization, in the center of this diagram anyway. It's somewhat analogous to a center of excellence that you might have for Agile, or even a transformation management office, but something that is basically there to support and enable your service management processes within the organization. And what we need to do in our new agile world is we need to think about how those processes are going to be driven. So there are some processes that I've called inside out, which are going to be driven by the service management center. So your incident management process, your request management process, they may well be driven from the service management center. But we can also imagine that other processes, the drivers for those processes, are going to come more directly from the business. So for example, service level management, availability management, those things are going to be driven by business need. And so we could expect those outside-in processes to be actually driven by the business, and we would facilitate those processes as part of our role in service management. And the big thing is that what we would expect is that each of those product teams that I showed on a previous slide would have a degree of process capability embedded within that product. And it would depend on the nature of the product they were supporting as to what kind of processes they needed to run. Obviously, we would have a degree of, a base requirement that we need to be able to see some governance and some reporting, but it would be down to the product teams themselves to ensure that we got those outputs and that the outcomes that those product teams delivered just use sufficient service management processes. So if I've got a fully automated DevOps product with its automated CI/CD pipeline and everything's quite hands off, I might not need any real interaction from change management, especially if I've got my own infrastructure and I'm separate from everything else. Well, that's me sorted, thank you very much. And actually, I'm not going to need much in the way of those traditional service management processes. And I'm sure, your Googles and your Amazons, well, I'm not going to be talking to them, am I? This is much more about those organizations which perhaps have a hybrid of some teams that are working in a very legacy way on legacy infrastructure and others which are perhaps much more, here's a word, digital, but who are much more DevOps aligned and automated and do not need so much. And it would be down to those product teams to define their own requirements. In order for this to work effectively, we need to have good tooling. So we need to have tooling which supports the end-to-end processes and enables us to see what's going on in those processes so that we have very clear a vision. And in this word, we've used the BVIRs, big visible information radiators, again, stolen from Agile. But basically, it could be your dashboards, your big monitors with the health of the various processes in the individual products. So I've talked about this quite a lot already, but so within that service management center, what are they going to be doing? Well, they are going to be the single point of contact for all service management related activities. If I'm a Scrum Master, if I'm a product owner, if I'm a team member and I've got a question about a process, they are my maybe not my first point of call, but certainly my final point of call if I can't get the answer from within my product team. And their job is to enable the service management activities within the organization. So, you can imagine that these people might show up at maybe even at daily Scrum meetings, certainly at weekly ceremonies, but they would be part of these individual products, but not full time. Obviously, we're not talking about having a role of a service manager within each product. That way, cost lies. So it's about them being able to ensure that those activities take place within the product. And one of the main ways they'll do that is by coaching the product team members. So telling them about the processes, working with them to decide what level of process they need in their individual product. They're always going to provide end-to-end service governance, and they're going to provide the reporting. And obviously, we're going to do our nice continual service improvement, promoting that mindset. But a lot of that is already embedded within the Agile mindset. So this should be a nice meeting of minds, and we should come up with a good solution between us. Obviously, there's still going to be critical process roles that are going to be kept, I think, within that service management center until you reach a level of maturity that we seldom see. So we can expect there would always be a major incident management capability within the service management center to coordinate across products if there was an issue. Maybe a central change management solution, obviously, but working with those DevOps teams to ensure that the change is nimble enough to support their more rapid deployments. All of this means that actually we probably need to change a bit the way we the attributes of the people within that service management center. because they're going to be coaching more than controlling. So we don't want to be a control point, we want to be an enabler. And I think that's a very big mindset change. We want to help individual teams have sufficient process so that they can, yes, they can have sufficient governance, yes, they can make sure that they are aligned to any contractual or other requirements. But more than that, we now need to be able to communicate. So we need these people to be the good things that you have in a coach. So a good communicator, an enabler, have those coaching abilities. They still need to be service management experts, and they need to be a bit more of a jack of all trades rather than perhaps an individual process manager might be nowadays. You know, there's going to need to be a broad understanding. They're going to need to have that facilitation and arbitration skill set, which enables them to work with individual product teams to ensure that they do have sufficient process in place. But they also need to be flexible and pragmatic about how much of that process needs to be. And, you know, a little bit of technical knowledge never does any harm, especially so we could imagine that some of those people would be aligned to particular products so that they have a better understanding of how that product works, but they won't be technical experts, perhaps in the way that some of our change analysts might have needed to be in the past. So it's quite a change, and I would argue that there isn't such a thing as agile service management, but we do need to work differently within an agile environment. So where in traditional service management you've got process owners and you've got process managers and they're operating and governing those individual processes, we need to look at how we can get those processes and the responsibility for doing and conducting those processes embedded throughout our organization. And to do that, we need our teams to focus on coaching and enabling and not compliance and workflow. Doesn't mean we don't need a good IT SM tooling solution. Doesn't mean we don't need to have clearly defined workflows, but those workflows need to be flexible enough excuse me, to enable the teams to work in the way that suits them, that ensures their outcomes. You know, at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're creating value. And the way to create value is to have a sufficiently robust way of working that includes service management processes that is just enough to ensure that we deliver our outcomes. We don't want to have that compliance, that stringent requirement for every single service request you have to fill in X, Y, and Z. But obviously, we still need the user information and the things that the user has to tell us. Otherwise, we can't enact it. But it doesn't mean that everybody has to have the same set of mandatory fields, the same set of information. The information that's required is the information that enables the product owner, the product team to deliver what they wish to deliver. We also need to ensure that our tooling enables us to work in a much more near real time. So we should be able to see that we are achieving the outcomes we want to achieve on a hourly basis or even a real-time basis. And we should be moving away from, you know, monthly service reviews, because in all honesty, by the time you have a monthly service review, it can be 7 weeks after that major incident has happened. It can be too late to realign to the contractual obligations that you have. And you know, there's nothing more frustrating for a customer when they've just had a major issue and that's what they want to talk about, but you're saying, no, actually, I want to talk about what happened 6 weeks ago because that is the purpose of this meeting. So moving to a more real-time way of driving our decisions and of monitoring our performance is how we need to go. We need to stop generating massive process documents. We just need to have sufficient process information to enable those teams to do what they need to do. I think the other points on here are fairly standard. You know, it's down to the actual speed of those individual product teams to drive the cadence of what we're releasing. But that's just reality nowadays, I'm afraid. But at the end of all this, we still need governance. So we still need to ensure that we have sufficient control and reporting to enable compliance, to enable contractual reporting. We just need to make sure that that is as light touch as possible and as responsive as possible. So I hope that's given you some things to think about, if nothing else. I don't know all the answers. Nobody does. We don't know where these organizations are going to be in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years time. But at the moment, we as service managers definitely need to think about how we bring the best value and we enable the best outcomes in our customers, where those customers are realistically IT, and IT is moving in an agile direction. Thank you very much.